The marble is cold beneath your feet, but you cannot move. October 30th, 1501. You are seated inside the private chambers of the most powerful man on earth, and your hand will not stop shaking around the wine cup you dare not set down. Because setting it down means admitting this is happening. Around you, men in scarlet robes are staring at the floor. Some have their eyes shut entirely. Some are moving their lips in silent prayer. And between their legs, crawling on hands and knees across the sacred floors of the Vatican, 50 naked women are gathering chestnuts while the Vicar of Christ watches from his throne and laughs. But what turns your blood to ice is not what you are watching. It is the knowledge that this is only the beginning. The bride seated at that table does not yet know what her father has designed for her before sunrise. Something so deliberate, so architecturally cruel that it will not touch her body the way violence does. It will reach inside and hollow out everything else. Stay with me. Because what comes next has been locked away for 5 centuries. And before this is over, you will understand exactly why. This is the story of Lucrezia Borgia, and the night that should have brought the Vatican to its knees forever. Before we go further, if this kind of buried history is what you come here for, hit that like button and subscribe to Crimson Archive. We pull these stories out of the dark so they don't disappear again. 3 weeks before that night, December 1501, a young man rides through the gates of Rome with the posture of someone walking toward a sentence he cannot escape. Alfonso d'Este, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara, 25 years old, descended from one of the oldest ruling houses in northern Italy, and he is terrified down to the marrow. He is riding into the most powerful city in the known world to marry a woman whose last 2 husbands no longer breathe without complications. The first was declared impotent in open court, publicly shredded, discarded the moment the alliance he represented lost its value. The second was stabbed on the Vatican steps in broad daylight. When he survived the blade, someone sent men to finish the job with their hands while his wife screamed on the other side of a locked door. That was 18 months ago. Now the empty place at the altar belongs to Alfonso. He had tried everything to avoid it. Illness, delays, diplomatic maneuvering. His father had sent letters to Rome begging the Pope to look elsewhere. The answer that came back was not a letter. It was a reminder that Cesare Borgia's armies were camped at the edge of Ferrara's territory. So here he is. The reception Pope Alexander VI gives him is constructed to fracture him before the wedding even happens. The Pope is 69 years old, massive in his chair, radiating authority the way a fire radiates heat. His eyes move over Alfonso the way a man sizes up something he is deciding whether to keep or throw away. To his right stands Cesare, 26, a former cardinal who found his real vocation in warfare and murder. The man who ordered the strangling of Alfonso's predecessor. He says nothing during the entire reception. He simply watches, wearing the faint, patient expression of something that has already decided the outcome and is merely waiting for events to catch up. For 3 weeks, Alfonso endures celebrations that are designed to humiliate him. Banquets where he is seated beside courtesans while cardinals pretend not to notice. Hunting demonstrations where Cesare casually exhibits what he can do with a weapon. Receptions where the Pope makes jokes about the men who came before. Every night Alfonso writes letters to his father that he knows are being opened and read by Borgia agents, and every morning he wakes surprised to still be alive. Then comes the wedding day. The papal chapel. Gold walls catching the light of 100 candles. Frescoes of saints gazing down from the ceiling. The smell of incense so dense it sits on the back of your throat. Pope Alexander himself officiates, his voice filling the chamber with the sacred words that will bind his daughter to her 3rd husband. Alfonso stands at the altar and cannot make his hands stop trembling. He can feel Cesare's eyes on the back of his neck the entire time. Steady, cold, the attention of something that does not blink. And next to him stands Lucrezia, 21 years old. Golden hair wound into elaborate braids threaded through with pearls. A gown worth more than entire villages in the countryside beyond Rome. She is beautiful in a way that costs something to look at directly. But it is her eyes that stop you completely. They are empty. Not grieving, not frightened, not angry. Empty. The way a room looks when someone has been gone from it for a long time and taken everything with them. The night before, while her ladies arranged her trousseau around her, Lucrezia had stood at the window and looked out at Rome. The city she was born in. The city where she had watched her second husband bleed on the steps below the Vatican. The city that had demanded everything from her since before she was old enough to understand what was being taken. One of her women, a young girl from Naples, had asked if she felt excited about the wedding. Lucrezia had smiled. The particular kind of smile you develop when showing a real expression is dangerous. Excited, she said, as though she were testing a word from a language she had never spoken. Yes. Of course. She did not sleep that night. She knelt on the cold stone floor of the chapel of Santa Maria in Portico until the sky began to change color, praying to a God who had not answered a single one of her prayers. Not when they dissolved her first marriage and called her ruined. Not when they killed Alfonso in the room beside hers. Not once across 21 years. But she prayed because it was the only thing left that no one had taken from her yet. Now she stands at the altar reciting vows she does not believe in a voice that barely qualifies as sound. Alfonso responds in the same register. Two people performing a ceremony neither chose, surrounded by men who have already decided what comes next. The rings go on. The Pope pronounces the marriage complete. And then Alexander smiles that wide, unhurried smile and announces that the real celebration is about to begin. The guests are guided to the Borgia apartments. The doors close. Guards move into position at every exit. And Lucrezia feels something pass through her that is not quite fear because she is past fear. Something colder. The certainty of someone who has been through enough storms to recognize the air before one arrives. Whatever her father has planned, she will survive it. She always survives it. The same way she always has, by going somewhere inside herself where none of them can follow, by becoming still before they can make her into something else. The feast begins the way any aristocratic wedding feast begins. Roasted birds dressed in gold leaf. Towers of imported fruit. Wine that costs more per flask than a working family earns across an entire season. Poets read verses praising the newly married couple. Musicians play. Laughter climbs the painted walls. Hours pass and the wine keeps moving and some of the guests begin to let their shoulders drop. Alfonso almost allows himself to believe this is simply a celebration. Then he notices the guards have quietly doubled. Then he notices that Césare's cup has not moved all evening. Then he notices that the Pope is watching him. Not warmly. Expectantly. The way you watch a stage just before the curtain moves. As midnight approaches, Césare rises from his seat. The room goes silent before he has taken a single step, as though every voice has been cut by the same hand at the same moment. He walks to a set of side doors and speaks quietly to someone on the other side. The doors open. 50 women enter the hall. They are dressed in extraordinary gowns. Velvet and silk and jewels that fracture the candlelight into shards across the walls. These are not street women. These are the most celebrated courtesans in Rome, women who move through the highest chambers of church and state. But their eyes are scanning the room and finding the exits and finding the guards at the exits, and something in their faces is wrong. Pope Alexander rises. Wine cup in hand. Smile fully open now. Tonight, he announces, the true entertainment begins. At his word, the women begin to remove their gowns. Fabric falls to the marble floor one piece at a time. Silk collects around bare feet. 50 women stand unclothed before the assembled princes of the church. Some cardinals find a point on the floor to study. Others grip their rosaries, lips working. A few younger clergy, deep enough into their wine, lean forward with expressions they will spend years trying not to remember. Alfonso stares at the table in front of him. His knuckles are white around the knife he will not use. But Alexander is not finished. Servants enter carrying baskets of chestnuts and scatter them across the floor. Hundreds of them rolling between feet, disappearing beneath chairs, spreading across marble that popes have walked across for centuries. The Pope explains the rules. The women must go to their hands and knees and collect the chestnuts. The woman who gathers the most will receive prizes from the papal treasury. Silk. Gold. Jewels. What happens next is almost impossible to hold in the mind as something real. 50 women on all fours moving across the floor between the legs of cardinals and bishops, beneath painted ceilings covered in saints and angels, The sound of knees on stone and chestnuts clicking in trembling hands and breathing that is almost but not quite sobbing, and above it all the sound of laughter. Alexander laughing. Césaire laughing. The sound multiplying off the golden walls until it fills the room entirely. Some guests join in, pitching chestnuts farther to extend the distance the women must crawl. Others sit completely still, their minds having found no frame to put around what they are seeing. An elderly cardinal pushes back from his chair and tries to stand and move toward the door. Guards step together in front of him. He sits back down and keeps his eyes on his hands for the remainder of the night. And Lucrezia sits beside Alfonso and shows nothing. She has been watching her family perform since before she could name what she was watching. She learned early how to leave the room without moving, how to be present in a body that is somewhere else entirely. It is the only way she has ever found to survive them. The banquet runs for hours more. When it finally ends, the courtesans huddle in corners holding the prizes they were given and unable to meet anyone's eyes. And Alfonso allows himself one careful breath because he thinks it is over. He is wrong. The Pope stands again. And the words he says next have been carried through 500 years of history because no one who was in that room ever entirely forgot them. The sacred duty of marriage, Alexander announces, must now be honored. In the ordinary world of noble weddings, consummation is a private act. Perhaps witnesses verify evidence the following morning, uncomfortable and archaic but within the understood boundaries of the time. What Alexander is ordering is something different in kind entirely. Alfonso and Lucrezia will consummate their marriage tonight. Not once. 3 times. And every person remaining in this room will serve as witness. The hall produces a silence that is different from quiet. The complete absence of sound that arrives when an entire room stops breathing simultaneously. Even Césaire, for one visible moment, looks as though the floor has shifted beneath him. Even he had not followed his father's thinking this far. Alfonso gets to his feet. His face has lost all color. He is a prince of one of the oldest houses in Italy. He was raised inside codes of honor and dignity that form the skeleton of who he understands himself to be. And he has just been instructed to perform the most private act of his life as a public spectacle for an audience he cannot dismiss. He looks at the guards. He looks at Césaire, whose hand rests without urgency on his sword. He looks at the Pope, whose expression has not shifted. There is no door in this room that leads anywhere useful. They are led to an adjoining chamber. A room built for receiving ambassadors, now holding a bed hung with silk. The doors are left open. Guests arrange themselves in the outer hall where the sightlines are clear. What takes place across the hours that follow removes every constructed layer of human dignity until nothing remains underneath. Alfonso, surrounded by watching eyes and armed men, his mind already somewhere it cannot be reached, does what he has been commanded to do. His movements carry no person inside them. Lucrezia lies beneath him with her eyes on the ceiling, silent, still, gone somewhere the Borgias have never been able to follow. She has done this before. She knows how to separate the part of herself that matters from the body they think they own. She has known how since she was 13 years old. But here is the thing that breaks you when you sit with it. Afterward, Césaire himself walks into the chamber. He examines what is there to be examined with the detachment of a man reviewing a document. Then he announces, loudly enough to carry into the outer room, that the first consummation has taken place. And he tells them they will wait 1 hour and then proceed again. 1 hour. Think about what lives inside that hour. Alfonso on the edge of the bed, unable to look in any direction. Lucrezia lying without moving, seeing something that is not the ceiling. The murmur of voices from the outer room, servants refilling cups for guests who cannot leave, and 60 minutes of knowing exactly what comes next. The second consummation happens near 2 in the morning. Both of them are operating somewhere entirely detached from their bodies now, going through the movements of something neither of them is present for, with the cardinals in the next room murmuring prayers that mean nothing in this context and the courtesans who were humiliated hours ago now weeping quietly for a woman they do not know. Even the guards have stopped looking at each other. No one says anything. No one does anything. Because the Pope has commanded it, and the Pope, as everyone in that room has built their lives around believing, speaks for God. Dawn comes. Grey light finding the windows of the Borgia apartments. And Alexander orders the third act. When it is finished, Césaire announces to the room that the marriage is now sealed 3 times over, irrevocable under every applicable law, religious and civil both. No annulment. No escape. No route back to before. The Pope raises his cup for the final toast. Alfonso sits at the edge of the bed with his head in both his hands, his body shaking in a way that will not stop. He will go back to Ferrara. He will never speak of this night to a single person for the rest of his life. Not to his family. Not to his children. Not to anyone who asks. And Lucrezia lies in her wedding gown, eyes open, fixed on a point that does not exist in this room. They wanted to destroy her while keeping her alive. They succeeded, or so they believed. To understand how a family arrives at something like this, you have to go back to where it started. Because no one is born capable of orchestrating this. That capacity is built across decades, one lesson at a time. Zativa, Spain, 1431. A boy named Rodrigo is born into the Borgia family. Minor nobility. Respectable but unremarkable. Then his uncle becomes Pope and the ground shifts under everything. The Borgias are no longer a Spanish family of middling standing. They are the family of the most powerful office in Christendom. Rodrigo is brought to Rome at 16, and what he finds there rearranges something fundamental inside him. The Italian nobility despises them. At every table he sits at every reception he attends, he can see it. The whispers. The smirks. The absolute certainty radiating off the old families that his people do not belong here and never will. Something closes inside Rodrigo in response to this and does not open again. What he observes instead is how Rome actually runs. The men who deliver sermons on humility own palaces with 40 rooms. The cardinals who stand in pulpits condemning lust maintain mistresses in houses they pay for with church money. The entire machinery operates on a single fuel, and that fuel is power, and everything else is theatre performed for the benefit of people too naive to see the mechanism underneath. So Rodrigo stops trying to earn his place. He decides to take it. He reaches the College of Cardinals at 25 through bribery, so open it was barely disguised. He fathers children and acknowledges them without embarrassment, while other men of his rank keep these things carefully hidden. He builds a network of informants and useful men that stretches across the length of Italy. In 1492 he buys the papacy itself, distributing so much silver and so many promises that the conclave barely bothered to pretend otherwise. By the time he sits on the throne of St. Peter, the lesson Rome taught him as a teenager has been absorbed completely. People are instruments. Affection is a form of leverage. Family is not a shelter. It is a resource to be managed. Césaire was the weapon Rodrigo sharpened most deliberately. Trained from earliest childhood in the application of force and the absence of mercy. Made a cardinal at 18 not because he believed in anything but because the position was useful at the time. When military utility surpassed ecclesiastical utility, he shed the robes without a backward look and became what he had always actually been. He took cities. He killed rivals in their beds. He poisoned men at his own dinner table. Machiavelli watched Césaire operate and thought he was seeing the ideal prince made flesh. But Lucrezia was the resource the family returned to again and again. From the age at which she could understand language, she was taught that her value was not internal. It was relational. Her beauty was not something that belonged to her. It was an inventory item to be assessed and deployed. First marriage at 13. Giovanni Sforza. By 1497 the alliance that marriage represented had exhausted its usefulness. The Borgias needed it dissolved. The grounds they chose, Giovanni declared publicly, officially, on the record, impotent. A lie so transparent that it became a joke across every court in Italy. No one contradicted it because no one contradicted the Pope. From this, Lucrezia learned the first foundational lesson. Your body belongs to the family. Your reputation belongs to the family. The truth itself belongs to the family. Second marriage at 17. Alfonso of Aragon. And here is the part of this history that is genuinely cruel in a way that distinguishes it from everything else. She loved him. Witnesses who had no reason to invent it recorded how her expression changed when he walked into a room. How they laughed together walking in the Vatican gardens, easy and unguarded in a way she was almost never seen to be anywhere else. Then Césaire decided the alliance Alfonso represented had stopped being valuable. The first attempt on his life failed. Alfonso survived the knife work on the Vatican steps. Lucrezia nursed him herself, prepared his food with her own hands because she trusted no one else in that building, fought for him across a month with everything she had and believed she was winning. Then the men came, threw her out of the room, strangled her husband while she beat on the door from the other side with both fists. She was 19 years old. After that, Lucrezia stopped being a person in any way her family could perceive. She became the surface of a person, the appearance of a woman who was still present. The real thing had gone somewhere interior and permanent and out of reach. By the morning of her third wedding, she had absorbed the final lesson. Hope is the instrument that causes the deepest damage. It makes you believe the situation can be different from what it is. And when they remove it, the wound goes far deeper than it would have if you had never allowed yourself to hope at all. The ceremony in the Borgia apartments was not her breaking point. Her breaking point had come and gone. What happened in that room before dawn was simply the most public staging of a destruction that had been proceeding steadily since before she was old enough to name it. Within days, the news was moving across Europe the way contagion moves. Ambassadors sent encrypted dispatches to Venice, to Florence, to Milan, to Paris. The Venetian ambassador, a man who had seen a great deal in a career spent at the edges of power, wrote that what had occurred in the Vatican surpassed anything recorded from the worst periods of the Roman Empire. Here is what happened to the people who were in that room. Pope Alexander VI died 2 years later under circumstances that have never been satisfactorily explained, the leading theory being poison, which has its own particular irony given the number of people he had killed the same way. Césaire lost everything within hours of his father's death. The entire architecture of his power had been built on one man's authority, and that man was gone. He died in 1507, ambushed in Spain, his body torn apart and left in the ground without a marker. The machine destroyed its makers. And Lucrezia lived for 18 more years. The journey to Ferrara took a month. People who saw her along the route noted that she looked out the window at landscapes she did not appear to see. She did not speak for the first 3 days. She moved into her new life with Alfonso, who could barely find a way to be in the same room with her without the weight of that night between them. Their marriage was a winter that never ended. They shared meals in silence. They fulfilled dynastic obligations. They did not speak of what had happened because there was no language for it that either of them could reach. But Lucrezia did not disappear. She refused to. She walked among the people of Ferrara. She gave to the poor in ways that were noticed and remembered. She supported artists and poets, created a court that people wanted to be part of, built a reputation through action rather than name. Ferrara called her La Buona Duchessa, the good duchess. She had 8 children. She ran her husband's affairs. She made herself essential and then beloved. But her ladies recorded that she woke screaming in the night. That sometimes in the middle of a conversation her eyes would go to a distance that was not in the room. That she spent long stretches kneeling on cold stone in the chapel, praying to the same God who had never answered a single prayer. She never went back to Rome. Not once in 18 years. She died in 1519, giving birth to her final child. She was 39 years old. Her last words were that she was ready to finally be free. Free. That is the word she chose. Why does this story still matter 5 centuries after the candles went out in those apartments? Not because of the Borgias. Because of what the Borgias reveal about the structure of destruction itself. The way systems that exist to protect people become the instruments that annihilate them. The way power, when it is accountable to nothing and no one, turns first and most completely on the people who are closest to it. What happened on the night of October 30th, 1501 was not an aberration. It was the logical endpoint of a system that had been running without correction for decades. When the man who holds the highest office in Christendom orchestrates something like this, surrounded by cardinals who bow their heads and say nothing, what is demonstrated is not that one man went wrong. What is demonstrated is that the corruption was not a flaw inside the system. The corruption was the system. The Vatican tried to make this disappear. Records destroyed. The diary of Johann Burchard locked away for centuries. But they did not fully understand what they were dealing with. You can burn documents. You can silence the people who were in the room. You can rewrite the official version until it bears no resemblance to what actually occurred. But you cannot erase what people carry inside them. And you cannot unmake what has been carved into history by someone who decided the truth was worth the cost of telling it. Johann Burchard wrote his account knowing what it might cost him. He wrote it anyway, because some things are too heavy to carry alone. Because silence makes you part of what you are silent about. Because the people who are destroyed deserve someone who will say what happened to them out loud. 500 years later we found his words. Lucrezia Borgia was built to vanish. A transaction. A footnote. A name attached to someone else's story. Instead she outlasted all of them. Her father died by poison, possibly his own. Her brother was torn apart and buried without a name on the stone. The machine they built consumed them both entirely. But Lucrezia made something from the wreckage. She raised children who never knew what that night contained. She became La Buona Duchessa. She died not as a Borgia instrument but as something she had constructed herself out of everything they left her with. They wanted to destroy her while keeping her breathing. She kept breathing anyway. And that is what crosses 5 centuries intact. Power can strip away almost everything. Your body, your dignity, your ability to hope. It can turn the people who are supposed to protect you into the ones who take the most. But there is one place it cannot reach. The part of you that decides, in the dark and the silence and the aftermath, that you are still here. That is what Lucrezia held onto through 18 years of surviving what should not have been survivable, all the way to the last breath she took. I am still here. 500 years later, so is her story. If this is the kind of history you want more of, subscribe to Crimson Archive.